You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Identity proofing is the essential starting point of any secure identity management system. At its core, proofing is about answering a deceptively simple question: is the person who they claim to be truly that person? Before credentials are issued or accounts are created, organizations must establish a baseline of trust that ties the digital identity to the real-world individual. Without strong proofing, the entire identity life cycle becomes fragile. Attackers could impersonate others at the outset and then enjoy legitimate credentials that pass every future security check. Imagine building a house on unstable ground. The strongest locks on the doors mean nothing if the foundation itself is flawed. Hardened organizations recognize identity proofing as the bedrock upon which all subsequent identity controls depend. Federation represents the next step in the story. Once an identity is trusted, how can that trust be shared across multiple systems and domains without requiring users to authenticate repeatedly? Instead of each application maintaining its own authentication stack, Federation allows one system, the identity provider, IDP, to validate the user and pass that assurance to other systems called service providers, SPs. The technical underpinnings may involve protocols like SAML or OpenID Connect, but conceptually, Federation is about extending trust. It is akin to presenting a passport at multiple borders. Once one authority validates it, others rely on that assertion without rerunning the verification themselves. While Federation streamlines user experience and reduces password sprawl, it also concentrates risk. If the IDP is compromised, every federated service may be at risk. This duality makes Federation both a powerful enabler and a critical governance challenge. Levels of assurance, LOA, provide a way to calibrate identity proofing to the sensitivity of the resource being protected. Not all systems need the same rigor. A public discussion forum may accept a simple email verification as sufficient. A payroll system handling salaries requires far stronger checks, perhaps involving government-issued identification or even in-person validation. LOA frameworks create tiers of trust, mapping the strength of proofing to the criticality of the system. This prevents over-engineering demanding passports for casual services or under-securing, allowing weak checks for high-value assets. Hardened organizations define and document LOAs explicitly, ensuring that every identity process is proportionate to the risk of the data or systems involved. Proofing methods themselves vary widely, each with strengths and limitations. Document verification is perhaps the most familiar, requiring individuals to present driver's licenses, passports, or similar official credentials. These can be scanned, validated electronically, or checked manually. Biometrics add another layer, tying identity to something physically inherent, such as a fingerprint or facial structure. Knowledge-based checks like "what was the model of your first car" have historically been popular, but data breaches have made them increasingly unreliable, as attackers can often find the answers online. Third-party attestations, such as a bank verifying a customer's identity before issuing digital credentials, extend the trust chain. A robust system may layer multiple proofing methods, combining what you have, what you are, and what you know, to create resilience. Hardened organizations are careful to choose proofing techniques that balance assurance, cost, and user convenience. The identity lifecycle follows a natural sequence: proofing, credential issuance, maintenance, and eventual revocation. Proofing establishes initial trust. Credential issuance provides the user with tools to access systems, and maintenance ensures that credentials remain valid and aligned with changes in roles or responsibilities. Finally, revocation closes the loop by removing credentials when they are no longer appropriate. Each stage carries risks. Weak proofing creates imposters. Sloppy issuance introduces backdoors. Poor maintenance allows privilege creep, and delayed revocation leaves orphaned accounts. Hardened organizations design this lifecycle deliberately, with automation and governance at every step to ensure that identity remains a living, managed asset rather than a one-time event. Privacy and regulatory concerns loom large in identity proofing because the process often involves sensitive personal information. Collecting documents, biometrics, or financial attestations creates a store of high-value data that, if mishandled, becomes a liability. Regulations like GDPR and CCPA demand principles such as data minimization, collect only what is strictly necessary, and storage limitation, retain data no longer than required. Hardened organizations adopt privacy-by-design practices in their proofing workflows. This may involve encrypting proofing data at rest, anonymizing logs, or deleting raw materials immediately after validation. They understand that trust is fragile, and a breach of proofing data not only exposes individuals, but also undermines the credibility of the entire identity system. Trust frameworks and relying party agreements provide the governance scaffolding that makes federation work at scale. A trust framework defines the standards and processes that every participant in the ecosystem must follow, covering everything from proofing methods to encryption standards. Relying party agreements then formalize these expectations contractually, spelling out responsibilities, liabilities, and reporting obligations. For example, if an IDP asserts that a user is authenticated and later that assertion proves false, who bears responsibility? Hardened organizations treat these agreements as seriously as technical controls, ensuring that federation is backed by enforceable rules rather than informal assumptions. Phishing and replay risks are prominent in federated systems. Attackers may create spoofed IDPs to trick users into handing over credentials, or they may intercept and replay valid assertions to impersonate users. Countermeasures include cryptographically signed assertions that cannot be forged, strict audience validation to ensure tokens are only valid for intended services, and short-lived tokens that minimize replay value. Hardened organizations also layer MFA into their IDPs, making credential theft less useful to attackers. They view federation not as an invulnerability shield, but as a new attack surface that must be hardened deliberately. Designing identity proofing and federation processes requires balancing onboarding friction with assurance. Strong proofing adds friction, longer wait times, more user actions, higher costs. Weak proofing lowers friction but undermines trust. The challenge is to calibrate friction so that legitimate users are not discouraged, while attackers are deterred. Hardened organizations use risk-based proofing to strike this balance, requiring stronger checks only where sensitivity demands it. For everyday accounts, they streamline. For privileged or sensitive accounts, they demand rigor. This user-centric design ensures adoption while preserving assurance. Incidents involving compromised identity records highlight why lifecycle management and reproofing are essential. If an attacker fraudulently passes proofing, or if identity data is later stolen, the organization must revoke associated credentials, investigate the breach, and re-verify the affected individuals. This may involve asking users to repeat portions of the proofing process or presenting new evidence of identity. Hardened organizations prepare for such scenarios with playbooks that treat identity compromise as a high-severity incident, recognizing that the ripple effects can extend across all federated systems. A practical action to begin strengthening proofing in federation involves focusing on one high-sensitivity service. Security leaders can start by determining the required LOA for that service, then documenting an identity proofing flow that specifies which artifacts are acceptable, such as government-issued IDs, which verification steps are mandatory, manual validation, automated scans, or third-party attestation, and how long data will be retained. Once this proofing flow is validated, the service can be federated securely, knowing that the foundation of trust is solid. Hardened organizations expand from this pilot, scaling identity proofing and federation across systems with confidence and control. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. When discussing federation, two standards frequently come to the forefront: SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language, and OIDC, OpenID Connect. Both aim to let users authenticate once and carry that assurance across multiple services, but they do so differently. SAML, an XML-based standard, has long dominated enterprise use cases, particularly with legacy applications and large-scale corporate single sign-on deployments. OIDC, built on top of OAuth 2.0 and using JSON, is more lightweight and suited for modern cloud-native and mobile environments. Conceptually, SAML is verbose and highly structured, whereas OIDC emphasizes simplicity and agility. Hardened organizations often maintain both, SAML to support existing enterprise apps and OIDC to enable newer SaaS and API-driven ecosystems, carefully managing their coexistence. Single sign-on (SSO) is the practical result of federation, and its benefits are both user-friendly and security-enhancing. Users log in once, typically through their enterprise IDP, and gain access to dozens of services without re-entering credentials. This reduces password fatigue and lowers the temptation to reuse weak passwords across platforms. However, SSO also consolidates risk. If a federated account is compromised, it can open doors to all connected services. Federation security, therefore, includes measures like multi-factor authentication at the IDP, careful attribute release policies, and strict account linking rules. Hardened organizations design SSO as both a convenience and a high-value target, protecting it with layered defenses that account for its importance. Token management is a critical detail in federation. Tokens represent the user's identity and permissions, so their lifetimes must be tightly controlled. Short-lived tokens limit the damage if they are intercepted, while refresh tokens allow seamless re-authentication but require careful protection to avoid misuse. Revocation mechanisms, such as blacklists or rotation, ensure tokens can be invalidated when compromise is suspected. Hardened organizations treat tokens as the currency of federation. They enforce expiration, rotation, and revocation just as carefully as a financial system would handle real money, recognizing that lax token management undermines the whole trust model. Federation ecosystems depend on metadata exchange and trust anchors to function reliably. Metadata files contain details about IDPs and SPs, including endpoints, supported bindings, and cryptographic keys. These must be shared securely and updated regularly. Trust anchors, such as root certificates, form the foundation for validating assertions and signatures. If metadata is outdated or trust anchors are mismanaged, federation can fail or be hijacked. Hardened organizations maintain disciplined metadata exchange processes, with automation where possible, and enforce strong cryptographic anchors to ensure that federation remains resilient and tamper-proof. Provisioning and deprovisioning become far more scalable when integrated with federation. Instead of manually creating accounts across each service, federated attributes, such as group membership or department, can drive access decisions automatically. Standards like CIM, System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, overlay federation to handle account creation, updates, and removal. This ensures that when an employee leaves, access across all federated services is revoked automatically. Hardened organizations embrace this automation, knowing that manual deprovisioning is too slow and error-prone in fast-moving environments. By linking federation to provisioning workflows, they close the gap between identity events and access enforcement. Monitoring federation activity is essential to detect misuse. Unusual events, such as an IDP issuing assertions to unexpected service providers or a sudden surge in authentication attempts, may signal compromise. Hardened organizations configure monitoring systems to flag anomalies like misconfigured relying parties or excessive failures. Alerts tied to federation events flow into CEMs and incident response platforms, ensuring that federation traffic is scrutinized with the same rigor as endpoint and network activity. Federation, after all, is not invisible plumbing. It is a high-value channel for attackers to exploit if unmonitored. Resilience planning addresses what happens when an IDP is compromised or unavailable. If the IDP goes down, all federated services relying on it may be inaccessible. Fallback mechanisms, such as backup IDPs or emergency local accounts, must be planned carefully to avoid single points of failure. When compromise is suspected, hardened organizations can revoke trust with the affected IDP, forcing reproofing and reestablishing of federation links. Recovery is not just technical. It requires communication with relying parties, reassignment of trust anchors, and reissuance of credentials. Hardened organizations practice these scenarios to ensure that an IDP outage or breach does not cascade into a prolonged enterprise-wide disruption. Privacy remains a constant theme in federation. Attribute minimization ensures that only the data required for access decisions is released, avoiding unnecessary exposure of personal information. Consent mechanisms allow users to understand and approve how their attributes will be shared across services. Just-in-time provisioning, where accounts are created only when first needed and attributes are limited to the essentials, reduces long-term storage of personal data. Hardened organizations adopt these privacy-preserving practices, ensuring federation enhances convenience without becoming a channel for overcollection or misuse of sensitive identity data. Cross-domain access policies add nuance to federation. Assertions can include conditional requirements, such as allowing access only if the device posture is compliant, if the login originates from an expected region, or if the session meets multi-factor criteria. These policies prevent federation from becoming an all-or-nothing trust handoff. Hardened organizations write conditional assertions into their federation flows, ensuring that context device location risk signals is embedded into every access decision. This makes federation adaptive and risk-aware rather than a static trust mechanism. Vendor and partner agreements form the non-technical backbone of federation. When enterprises federate with external partners, liability questions arise. Who is responsible if an assertion is falsified, if an attribute is misused, or if a breach occurs? Agreements must specify breach notification timelines, audit rights, and responsibilities for identity proofing. Hardened organizations negotiate these terms explicitly, ensuring that federation across organizational boundaries is underpinned by enforceable contracts, not just handshake trust. Key management in federation requires constant vigilance. Certificates used to sign assertions must be rotated on schedule, and federation trusts must be reevaluated periodically. Stale or expired keys undermine trust, while long-lived certificates increase exposure. Hardened organizations maintain rotation schedules, test renewals, and audit federation trusts regularly. This prevents drift and ensures that cryptographic strength is maintained as algorithms and standards evolve. Federation is not a one-time setup, but a living ecosystem requiring continual upkeep. In the end, strong identity proofing combined with disciplined federation management creates a secure, user-friendly access model. Proofing ensures that credentials start from a place of trust, while federation ensures that trust can be extended across services without repeating authentication endlessly. But these benefits come only when supported by governance, monitoring, and lifecycle controls. Hardened organizations approach identity proofing and federation as strategic capabilities, designed for convenience but enforced with rigor, recognizing that identity is both the front door and the foundation of modern enterprise security. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.